Good afternoon. Welcome to the February 4th, 2017 Salem City Club Forum. I'm Alan Pollack, the Salem City Club president for this year. Thank you all for being here. I would also like to welcome our viewing audience of CCTV and the KMUZ audience listening on 100.7 and 88.5 FM. We have an outstanding program for you today. The timing is right there. It's an important topic that's being talked about throughout this country and the world, and also right here at Salem City Club. Before I turn it over to our program lead today, I'd like to, for the viewing audience, thank our supporting sponsors, KMUZ Radio, Virgil T. Golden Funeral Services, and Pioneer Bank. I would now like to introduce our program lead for today's session, Hans West.
It's really great to see a good turnout, and I'm delighted that we didn't have to cancel this like we did in December. I truly thought the ice would hit hard and do it again, but thank goodness. So it's my pleasure to introduce this talk on international refugee resettlement here mainly in the Salem area, the mid-Willamette area, and in Oregon, and with some discussion, I believe, at the national level. Obviously, a very timely topic. I believe, and I think that was stated by somebody else too. Our speakers today include Tuck Sunule Gillespie, here to my right, and she is the Director of Refugee Resettlement with Catholic Charities of Oregon. And she will discuss resettlement in the state of Oregon, and I believe we'll talk a little bit about what she knows about what's happening at the national level. We'll see. I really don't know. Our subsequent speakers will be Doug and Anya Holcomb, and they are pastors of refugee ministries at Salem Alliance Church, and they're the next two over. And these two, acting as pastors with the church there, they founded an organization here just over the last year called Salem for Refugees, and they are co-directors. And that is an organization of over 100 people, and they're all volunteers. There's no paid anybody in that group. I don't know how they do it. That somehow they raise money, though I think it's a good cause, so maybe that's not so hard. Finally, we will have Mr. Ali Al-Omrani on the far right there speaking. And Mr. Omrani, he is an Iraqi refugee who's been here, I think, at least 5 years, and currently works as a Salem Kaiser School Community Outreach Coordinator. And I believe, and I'm sure he can correct me, I believe he deals with Arabic-speaking refugees. That's my understanding. Finally, I'd like to acknowledge a member in the audience, Mr. Matthew Westerbeck. He, could you stand just briefly? He is the he's a Salem Kaiser Refugee Resettlement Program Manager for Catholic Charities. Thanks for being here. So, just a little bit more on the background of these speakers. Tuck Sunule Gillespie, she was born in a Thai refugee camp of Laotian parents. And while she was still a youngster, they moved to the United States. And that has obviously influenced her, I think, rather profoundly, you know, having been there. So she is currently, as I mentioned, the Director of Refugee Resettlement with Catholic Charities. She also is with the, let's see me get this right, she's a training director and board member of Oregon Health Care Interpreters Association, because that's, I think, the thing she appreciates more than anything. You need good interpreters. You need to be able to communicate. And she has spent a lot of her professional life doing that. She has dual degrees in anthropology, sociology, and a master's in social work. Next, we have the Holcombs, Doug and Anya, who I think have spent more time living abroad than living in the United States, which probably works well for what they're doing. And they met each other, I believe, when their parents were working overseas. They met in Nairobi, Kenya, if I've got that right, and actually did some more schooling overseas. And finally, I don't know the order here, but moved back to the States to get additional education, and were married along the way while they were completing work in a master's in social work for Anya, and Doug getting a master's degree in business administration. And of course, then they moved around some. They even went to Kosovo for a while, and finally came back as refugee ministries with the Salem Alliance Church. And finally, I think I mentioned Mr. Omrani, Al-Omrani, excuse me. Did I? I think I mentioned the background on him. So please help me welcome these speakers to Salem City College.
All right, Sabaidi, and good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me here. This podium is a little too official for me. But Jan says I have to be back here and hang on tightly. So first of all, I just want to ask that you give me some grace as I try to get through this presentation. It's been a little disorienting and somber for us in resettlement this last week or so. So I'm going to try to find space, if possible, if I could channel your energy, kind of help me get through this. I'd really appreciate that. Thanks again, Hans and Jan, for inviting me here. It is definitely a privilege, and I don't use that word often in my journey. As Han mentioned, you know, I was born in a refugee camp, and while I don't understand what that plight was like, I do understand what it's felt like to live in the U.S. and watch my parents go through all sorts of hardship, not being able to speak English and having to raise 6 kids. They cleaned toilets proudly, and who'd have ever imagined that they would raise 6 kids, 3 girls, 3 boys, put us through college. And I now, after all these trials and tribulations, I get this fancy title of being the Director of Refugee Resettlement. I have an office, a corner office, I might add, with windows on both sides, and business cards with my family's name on it. Who would have ever thought that a refugee would have made it this far? Not a day goes by that I don't think of all the sacrifices that were made for me to be here. I always thank the men and women who lost their lives to get me here. I always thank also the volunteers who helped my family journey through what it's been like to live in America. And then, of course, I thank my parents. So just to give you some information about migration on a global scale, and then bring it down to locally, and then Anya and Doug will take it from there. There are over 60 million displaced people in the world. There are over 20 million who have fled war and persecution. And of those 20 million, less than 1% gets resettled. When I mention that and people ask, well, if we're really only resettling less than 1%, are we really making that much of a difference? I could have gotten angry when I heard that, but I didn't. It inspired me even more. Because I'm not 1%, right? And I think we forget that when it comes to who refugees are, not what refugees are. For many of us, we don't want to be in America. It's not that it's not a beautiful place, but we want to be home. But home's just not there anymore. I always say it doesn't really matter, to me at least, what part of the coin you're on, Republican, Democrat, liberal. This is truly the most amazing country in the world. It's the only country that welcomed me and my family when my own country turned its back. I will forever be indebted to this country, and I think that's a lot of what refugees who we get to resettle feel as well. So I also forgot to preface that I'm very circular. I'm more of a storyteller. I'm not linear as most folks in the Western world, so forgive me. So yes, where was I at? 20 million refugees, right? And less than 1% gets resettled. The President of the United States is actually the one who determines the refugee ceiling every year. And last year it was 85,000, and right before President Obama left office, he presented 110,000. And it's really Congress that makes that decision of whether we as a country can resettle that many people. I think that's the piece that a lot of people don't understand. Catholic Charities and Lutheran Community Services and Ecumenical Services of Oregon up in Portland, we're the only 3 resettlement agencies here in Oregon. So we don't make those decisions. That comes at 30,000 feet. We get the privilege and the honor of welcoming refugees to our state. I know in the news there's a lot of confusion, too, about the executive order that was recently signed. I think there's an overlap with immigrants and refugees. How that is impacting our program, essentially, the 120-day suspension, is we have no more refugees coming to Oregon. That was shut down as of Friday. We had hundreds of families who were waiting to reunite that already had tickets. I called it the golden ticket. They already had those in hand. And that has ended for us, at least for 120 days. I also realize, too, that there's a lot of confusion about the vetting, which I understand, absolutely. Refugees are the most scrutinized when it comes to vetting for any traveler to the U.S., right? Department of, I had to write it down, sorry, because there's so many. Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Justice, FBI, Department of State, and the National Counterterrorism Center. Those are just the security screenings that a refugee has to go through. That's not including the medical screening and then the interview. It takes about, on average, 2 years to go through that screening. And it takes an average of 7 to 10 years to even get resettled. So I think is a piece that's the narrative that's not being shared, or if it is, it's being confused with the immigration piece. I don't know if I'm missing anything else. Oh, I am. So how does that impact here in Oregon? We bring in about, between the 3 resettlement agencies, anywhere from 1,600 to 2,000 people a year. It is our job as a resettlement agency to, like I mentioned earlier, welcome them at the airport. We have to find housing for them before they arrive. We have to set up their home with all the basic necessities, the things that I take for granted now. If there's 8 people in the family, we have to have 8 pillows, right? 8 beds, and the list goes on. It's our job to make sure that we connect them to resources. And it's our job to teach them everything about the United States of America. We have to teach them about budgeting, hygiene, US laws, keeping your home safe. We have to do all that in 30 days. That's really what the initial resettlement program looks like. It's technically called the United States Refugee Admissions Program. If you need more time, if a person is not able to adjust, you can get up to 90 days, but that's it. 90 days of services to help human beings who have fled things that none of us want to imagine. And we have to serve them within 90 days. There's no way we can do this work without the volunteers, without the community. And we've seen that time and time again when we started expanding our resettlement to Salem. Resettlement has been happening in Portland since the 40s. When we started to come down to Salem a year ago, I never imagined what it was going to be like. I mean, the way resettlement is happening here in Salem is quite different than how it's being, what's the word? English is my second language. I live in 2 thought worlds. What was it? Handled. Yes, it's just different. So, yeah, I mean, I could be up here forever talking about this. It's so complex, but as you can see, it's really hard for me to talk about it without bringing the human piece to it. I don't see this as a program. I see it as, it is our duty, I feel like, as human beings to be able to give other people a chance. How could I not? I take so much pride in going to the airport. I cry every single time I see families arrive to us. At Catholic Charities, we always make sure we give water. It's the Lao way. We never ask if you want water, we always give water. It's our way of saying thank you for making the journey to us. And we do that with every family that comes. And I not only love my job, but I love this part of how this has evolved in my journey. So I just want to thank you all again for being here and giving me the opportunity to share some information about migration and refugee and how that impacts our state. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Talk, and thank you all of you for having us here. It truly is a privilege. My name is Anya, and Hans told you a little bit about my husband and myself, and I'll just tell you a little bit more. So I grew up here in the Salem-Keizer area, so this was home for me until about halfway through high school when my family moved to Nairobi, Kenya, and I had the privilege of meeting this amazing guy there. And as Hans mentioned, we've had the privilege of getting to travel quite a bit to different places in the world. In college, we spent time in the Middle East studying there and really studying the Arab-Israeli conflict. We got to visit a number of Palestinian refugee camps. And for us, that was our first exposure to this whole concept of refugees and what that meant, that these people were forced to flee their countries for various reasons and were now taking refuge in a third country. And our hearts were really drawn and really broken by the situations that we saw. We lived for a number of years up in Portland and chose intentionally to live in a very diverse neighborhood. Most of our neighbors were immigrants or refugees, and we lived on a street that at that time had the most diverse census tract in the state of Oregon. And it was an amazing experience for us, and we were incredibly blessed by the friendships we got to have with those folks and the stories that we got to hear about their lives. Most recently, we were working in Eastern Europe in the nation of Kosovo. Kosovo is a nation, many of you know, had a large war back in the late 90s, and so about 50% of the Kosovar population was either displaced or became refugees during that time. So we got to hear a lot of their stories while we were there, and in addition, got to do some work in a refugee camp in Macedonia during the mass migration of refugees who were fleeing out of Africa and the Middle East, making their way through Eastern Europe and going into Western Europe. At that time, there were approximately 7,000 people per day passing through that refugee camp, and that was a very powerful experience as well. So we returned from that about a year ago, and we were thinking a lot about this global refugee crisis. As Talk mentioned, 65.3 million people currently displaced in our world. This is on record the highest number we have in global history. 21.3 million of those are refugees, meaning that they've actually crossed a border and sought safety in another country. So this is a massive issue in our world today, and for us that massive issue became very personal through our experiences of real people and real stories. We ended up landing back in Salem, where I had grown up and where we had family, and we're absolutely thrilled to find out that there were refugees now being resettled in the city of Salem. So we got involved through Catholic Charities, through our church, Salem Alliance Church, and then several months ago founded the organization Salem for Refugees. I'd like to talk a little bit about who are these refugees who are coming to our city. And of course, these are people, so everybody has very unique and very different stories, like each of us, but would like to share just some common experiences that we're finding with many of the families that we're getting to know here in Salem to paint a picture for you. So most of them have fled persecution, war, or violence in their home countries. And most of them that we have talked to did not want to leave their homes, just as you or I would not want to leave our homes either. There's some families we met in the refugee camp in Macedonia. They were traveling with young children, just like the same ages of my 2 young children. They had been walking outside for days, sleeping outside under trees. They came from situations where they had had very highly skilled jobs. The kids went to school. They were living lives very similar to the lives that we live here. And then they were uprooted because of the very real threat of being killed, of having their homes bombed, being destroyed. So they made this incredibly difficult journey with elderly, with young children, simply to try and survive. I remember looking into the eyes of some of these kids and thinking that could just as easily be my very own kids. I remember sitting with a young man in the refugee camp. He had come from Syria, and young, in his 20s, looked very tough. And as I sat there with him, just asking a few questions about his journey, he began to weep, just to weep, tears coming down his eyes, telling me that he had had to leave his elderly parents in Syria because they were not able to make that journey with him, and he didn't know if he would ever get to see them again. And there was a high likelihood they would be killed because of the city that they were coming from. So these people didn't want to leave. This was their home. They didn't want to leave, but they were forced to leave. Also, a lot of these people have experienced very traumatic events in their lives, things that I can hardly even imagine. There's families here in Salem who literally watched loved ones, husband, parents, children, be killed right before their eyes, something I cannot even fathom. These people want the same things that we would want. They want opportunities for their kids, they want education, they want safety and freedom for their families. They want the chance at starting a new life. Talking with some teenage girls in the refugee camp from Afghanistan and getting to see, even in the midst of this very difficult journey they were making, the hope in their eyes as they told me what they were hoping to do. They wanted to go to school. They hadn't had the opportunity to go to school. They were dreaming of going to school, getting an education. One wanted to become a teacher, one wanted to become a doctor. They want the same things that we would want for ourselves and for our own children. The average time most of these folks have spent in a refugee camp is 6 to 10 years. So it's a very long time. As Talk mentioned, it's less than 1% of refugees that are chosen to be able to be resettled in a third country, any third country. And so it's a smaller percentage of those that end up coming to the United States. If they're chosen to come to the United States, as Talk mentioned, that vetting process is 18 months to 2 years. But they've been that longer, 6 to 10 years, waiting in a refugee camp. A family here in Salem described to us recently how intense that vetting process was, where they would have multiple interviews coming and hearing their story over and over again. If they got one fact wrong in their story, then it would be over. It had to be 100% consistent. So this vetting process is incredibly extensive, and we have heard stories of that from families here in Salem. These families arrive here in Salem. It's a new language for most of them. Some speak a little English. Many of them only speak a tiny bit of English when they arrive. New language, new culture, new way of life. Many come with hardly any possessions that they've been able to bring with them. And often they don't know anybody or have any connections here when they arrive. And lastly, these folks are courageous, they are hopeful, excited to begin a new life. They're skilled, highly skilled. They're hard workers. They are innovative. They are hospitable like you couldn't even imagine. I mean, they take hospitality to an entirely new level. They bring incredible benefits to our community, and I know for me, knowing them and having a relationship with them has been an incredible privilege. And I feel like it's been an amazing gift to our community to get to welcome them here over this past year.
So as we began our resettlement process for our family here in the Salem area and began to get involved with working with refugees here in Salem, we were struck with the overwhelming response from the Salem community. As Talk mentioned, it's been incredible to see what we have done in our city to help welcome refugees. People have been through unimaginable things and now are given this new opportunity, but they need the community, they need the resources to come around them to help them in this transition process. And we've experienced minor transitions in our lives compared to what they're going through. And to see what Salem has done so far and is continuing to do has been incredible. We also noticed, though, that there was a lack of kind of a centralized organizing entity to help coordinate all the efforts of refugee integration and resettlement here in Salem. And it's not the resettlement agency's jobs to do that. They have their contracted work, as Talk was saying. It's short. They wish it could be more, but they do all that they can do with the resources that they're given. And it's really our job as the community to make Salem a home for these new families and individuals coming into our neighborhoods. And so when we noticed that was when we began to dream of this vision of what if we could start this network of people, this organization that would really work to bring together all the resources and people who wanted to come alongside refugees as they made their transition here into Salem. And so as that vision was being born, we got invited in October to 5 lunches that was hosted by Sam Skillern with Salem Leadership Foundation. And he had connected with several different entities, all the people that were working with refugees in the Salem area, and invited them to some lunch meetings just to say, let's try to coordinate our efforts and have a greater impact. No point in learning things twice. We can learn it once and share those resources and be a better community together as we welcome refugees. And out of those 5 meetings and the vision that we had was birthed Salem for Refugees, the organization that we started. And it has just been exciting to see. Over 100 people started as a part of that in November. And now we have well over 200 people that are on the email list and 130 people that have come to the last several meetings. And it's just exciting to see all the resources coming together for refugees, including people from the school district, people from businesses, nonprofits, the faith communities. So we're continuing to work towards seeing that develop and grow. So what is Salem for Refugees? Salem for Refugees, our mission is we're an umbrella organization that exists to empower refugees to thrive in Salem by facilitating this holistic and coordinated effort to welcome refugees, our new neighbors. Our vision is to see all refugees in Salem as valued, thriving, contributing members of our community. And so we have several goals that we would like to see accomplished as we continue to develop Salem for Refugees. And we want to do this in partnership with our new neighbors, with the refugees that are coming. And we bring together, like I mentioned, the network of the resettlement agencies, the faith communities, businesses, nonprofits, government organizations, City of Salem, community members, and others for the purpose of communication, collaboration, volunteer mobilization, as well as resource development. Currently, we're managing the Salem for Refugees email list and the website. The website is very much in its infancy. We just have 1 page so far. A lot more is in development there. That will be a place where we can collect all the resources available for refugees and continue to help volunteers access those as they work with refugees. We facilitate monthly meetings for all the participants in Salem for Refugees, and anyone is welcome to those meetings. We host ongoing community trainings and mobilize volunteers to meet the needs of resettlement agencies and other organizations that are in the community serving refugees. And lastly, we collaborate with resource teams that are focused on developing resources for refugees in 6 primary areas. So we've developed these, there are 6 areas that we've divided into that are resource teams focused on employment, English, education, healthcare, which has a subcategory of mental health, as you can well imagine with all the trauma that some of the people are coming from. Housing, which also has a whole donations component to it for setting up new houses for refugees as they come. And then cultural navigation, which includes a subset of advocacy, interpretive services, legal services, transportation, meals, technology, and those are continuing to develop.
So in this current political climate, as a talk described to us a bit about what this executive order means in terms of stopping new refugee resettlement for the next 120 days, we have some areas of focus as Salem for Refugees during this time. The first one is that we want to take this opportunity to really affirm the kind of community that we want to be. So we have several affirmation statements that I will read to you now. We affirm our commitment to making Salem a welcoming place where refugees have the opportunity to thrive. We affirm our care and concern for every human being who is fleeing violence and persecution around the world. We affirm our love and compassion towards those who are suffering, regardless of their nationality or religion. We affirm our willingness to give our time, skills, and resources to those who need our help. We affirm our desire to build relationships and learn from those who are different than ourselves. And we affirm our belief that those moving to our city from other nations enrich our community and contribute to our lives in unique and valuable ways. So those are some things as a Salem for Refugees community that we affirm during this time. We also are focused on continuing to care for the refugees who are already here in Salem. I believe we have approximately 130 refugees who have arrived in the last year and a few months. And there's still a lot of needs there and a lot of focus we can give to being able to care for them, hopefully at an even higher level. We also want to advocate for those who aren't here yet, the 65.3 million people who have been displaced around the world. We want to focus on educating others on the global refugee crisis. And lastly, we will continue to prepare to welcome refugees who will come in the future.
So a lot of people ask us, what can I do to make a difference? And at the very basic level, you can be a good neighbor. So if you know or have a refugee that's in your neighborhood, just be a good neighbor like a good neighbor does. Take them a meal, invite them into your home, say hi. They will probably invite you into their home. Be prepared to drink some delicious coffee and maybe eat some food and stay for a while. Incredible people that we've gotten to know so far. We've put a sheet on each of the tables and the chairs so you guys can have some specific additional action steps if you're interested in making a difference. And the first thing is to donate. You can give financially to support and care for refugees in Salem. We just partnered with Salem Leadership Foundation as our fiscal sponsor, and so they have a fund that is set up. You can go to their website and donate. The instructions are there, and all of those dollars will be used to help care for and help settle refugees here in the Salem area. And again, as Talk mentioned, funding is limited, and so the community, we as the community, get the opportunity to really extend ourselves to help welcome refugees well beyond what's contracted. A second opportunity, and this is not on your sheet, but that we handed out, but there is one of these sheets on your table as well. It's either an orange color or a blue color. This is just a volunteer who has been connected with Salem for Refugees, knows quite a few of the refugee families, and has noticed the lack of board games and other games that the refugees have access to. And so she's set up this program that she would like to collect board games and different games to be able to offer to the refugees and then have those even used with the volunteers. It's a good English language learning opportunity, as well as just providing some recreation away from all the screen time that all of us get, TV and our mobile phone screens, of just having good, healthy entertainment together over a board game. Second thing on your sheet there that we had handed out was attend the Salem for Refugees meetings. On the first Monday of each month, we gather together from 12 to 1:30. We are being hosted right now at Salem Alliance Church. and anyone is welcome. Our next meeting is this next Monday in a few days. And we cover a range of topics as well as break into the 6 different resource groups that I mentioned earlier. Another thing that you can do is join the Salem for Refugees email list. So we send out opportunities of how to get involved, how to participate in what's happening here in the Salem area in regards to refugees. And so you can sign up for that by going to our website, and there's a sign up section at the bottom. And lastly, I just want to mention another thing that we can do is to really engage in productive conversations with people by listening with the purpose to understand. It feels like as things get heated up on all sides of the discussion, politically, it's easy to get emotional, and you start getting kind of shouting that happens back and forth. And once that happens, you begin to lose this element of moving forward in any productive way. And so that's one of the things we're encouraging and trying to practice ourselves, is we want to listen with the purpose to understand. And as Anya mentioned earlier, when you get to the foundation of what the things that we really want and care about, there are so many commonalities down there. We want safety, we want security, we want opportunity, we want to have a roof over our heads, especially here in Oregon when it rains so much. Those types of things are common to every human on this planet. And so just encourage you as you're engaging in conversations, think that way, and it will help for you to learn as well as to engage in more healthy and productive conversations. I'd like to introduce Ali now. He's been introduced before, but I just want to say I am so grateful just for my friendship that's developed with him. We've sat down for coffee and enjoyed getting to hear each other's stories, and I just so appreciate his perspective and the tenacity with he and his family have integrated into life here, and now he serves the school district in helping to coordinate efforts for refugees in the school. He's a huge gift to our city, and so would you welcome Ali as he shares some of his story.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ali Amrani, and I'm Iraqi, born in Iraq. I came here 6 years ago, and I'm a citizen right now. My journey started, thank you. My journey started after I finished college in Iraq. I have a bachelor's degree in veterinary medicine. And that time, I couldn't find a job in my field because of the situation. So I decided to work for the U.S. Army as an interpreter. I worked for the U.S. Army about 3 years, a little bit more. And I was eligible because of my situation and the whole security situation in Iraq. I was eligible for the special immigration visa here to the U.S. And it's not just me. I mean, there's a lot of people who worked with the U.S. Army, and they are still in Iraq, and some of them in Afghanistan as well. They served this country before they got any promises. We put ourselves on the line just because we believed in the freedom. I mean, we believe America is the land of freedom, and we did our job is really happily and without knowing we're going to come here. Then the situation got worse and worse. We got threatened, and then we got into programs which is created in 2000, probably 5 or 6. Then when they started bringing interpreters and contractors here to the U.S. And also still, I spent almost 2 years in the process, and I was still in the camp. So all refugees go to the same process, even if you're still working on the side inside the camps. Anyway, so I always say it, I love Salem, which is a city of peace. It's in Arabic is Salam, in Hebrew is Shalom, and it is really a city of peace. Love the people. The reason I came here, my captain, he's from Oregon, And he, in that time, they were having still a sponsoring system. So you have to have a sponsor to come here. So he offered me to be my sponsor. And he offered me to stay here in Salem with his mom. They had like small guest house. They told me I can stay in it till I get on my feet. And they offered me transportation and all the help till I get on my feet. I got a job, and then I got to know my wife. I started a family here, which is really great. But I always say it, I always love Salem. I worked many jobs since 2010 to right now. I work for the Salem Kaiser School District. I'm the school community outreach coordinator. My job right now, which is I'm really proud of, is I'm helping all the refugee kids in the school district to get them in the schools, to make sure there's like an easy transition for them to start a school. Because as a refugee, and I'm in contact with many refugees, I know, as all of you guys said, they spent probably 10 years in camps. They spent long time from their lives spending in camps. They come here, all they want is for their kids to be safe, to start right, to have a better chances in life than they did. So I'm really glad to help those kids to start schools and try to make closer to their dreams in the future, to get better jobs, live a better life. So this is kind of like short of my story, and I'm really happy to give back to the community. I mean, I'm happy to help those people, and again, I'm really thankful for all people here in Salem, especially, because they are really my big family. I left my family in Iraq, I left all my friends, but the family I got in here, like, it's really amazing. Thank you so much.
Okay. Yeah, that was great. It was touching. Excuse me. If I use the wrong word, and touching is one of them, I get emotional. Go figure. So I really, I'm sure there are lots of questions, and asking questions is a privilege of Salem City Club membership, and we have one mic that's going to be going around. And, well, we'll start there. And, yeah, I'll put mine in later. I was going to muscle in, but I can wait.
Leslie Zigan, City Club member. Ali, tell me, what's one of the best experiences and one of the worst experiences you've had trying to help the children? What kind of, I mean, they have problems of different kinds, but what can you do to make a difference for them?
Well, the good thing is to see the smile on their faces. I mean, see the hope. They, as kids, they just integrate with the classroom. And some things I always, it's challenges, let's say, it's not problems, it's challenges, especially for kids in high school. Like, they come and they are like 17, 18 years old. They missed a lot of school. I mean, during their journey, let's say. They didn't get like missed 5-6 years of education. So when they come here, it's really hard for them to catch up, and especially with math, like for example, because English you can learn it. You can but we have programs. I mean, for math and all of this, but I feel like they are kind of like a little bit behind. And school system for beginning, like when they come the first week, school system is different. As you guys all know, the school system here is different than the school system in other countries. It takes them time to acclimate, but as a district, we doing our best job to make it really easy for them. And from the feedback we get in, they are really happy. I mean, they are being in the Salem Kaiser School District, which makes me happy.
I think this would be for Toke. I'm Alan Holland City Club. I noticed that Catholic Charities is involved, Salem Alliance Church is involved, and others. So we got Catholic, Protestant, we've got a diversity of groups. Are the refugees respected and honored in the sense of allowing complete freedom of religious practice without expectation or imposition in any other way from Christian sects?
Good question. Absolutely. That's actually one of the contract requirements from Department of State. There's no proselytizing. Yes. In fact, when they first get off the plane, we're required to provide a culturally specific hot meal when they arrive. We really respect what they come to us with, what their beliefs are. Just traditionally, faith organizations have been the one to step up and take on these contracts. I hope that answers your question. But yeah, they are free to practice and think and believe whatever they want, and we honor that, absolutely.
And for us, with the Salem for Refugees organization that we've started, it really is truly an independent organization, even though we work at Salem Alliance Church. They have given us the space and the time to operate that as a separate entity. And we work with people from all different backgrounds, and include, faith-based, non-faith-based. The Salem Islamic Center is involved, so it's people from all different backgrounds. And again, we have no specific faith agenda. We want to make Salem a welcoming place. We function out of our faith. That's what motivates us. We're called to love our neighbors as ourselves, and we want to do that. But again, with proselytizing, it's not a function of Salem for Refugees.
Ali, I know that you are helping in resettlement and some of your family members, as we are at Prince of Peace Episcopal Church. Can you say how hard it is to find a job, how hard it is to find an apartment, and how hard it is to make sure that English language learning happens within the refugee community?
Definitely. So, as you all know, so I worked for Salem Kaiser School District, but before that, I had my family, and they are like some of them refugees. One of the biggest challenges when you come here, as I mentioned it, I graduated from veterinary medicine in Iraq, bachelor degree. When I came here, they didn't take my degree. But I'm fortunate I speak English, even a little bit. But for most of these families, they come here, they don't speak the language. And as Marcia said, there's a lot of challenges they face, especially like housing. And we have a family right now, they got kicked out of their apartment for no reason. Just the landlord done with the contract, and they have the right, I guess. So we've been helping Prince of Peace and some other people, helping to find an apartment, a 3-bedroom apartment for this family. And we've been working for a month, and I'm helping this family because they have kids in the school, and this is part of my job as well. And the requirement is almost impossible for this kind of families, because they ask for your income should be 3 times the rent. You have to have a credit history over 650, which is they've been here a year. And also you have to have a rental history for like 3 years, which is they're not gonna meet this criteria. I know right now there's a big demand on housing in Salem, so criteria can go up, and those people can find a place. Jobs as well. Most places don't hire anybody if you don't speak English. Although most of those refugees, they do have the skills. They're willing to learn. They work on learning English. But as what Doc said, and we all know, is a year enough to learn a new language or build a credit history or get 3 times rent as an income? It's hard. And most of these families, and something we didn't mention, but I know it, most of those refugees are kids and women. And they've been through a lot of hard stuff. I don't want to go along with this, but I just want to say it's really hard. I mean, I think we as a community, we can help with this. We know somebody can rent a place for a refugee family without asking about all of this, because it's kind of impossible. Or if somebody knows somebody can hire a refugee for even part-time job and see, give them a chance. I mean, I guess they deserve it.
Doug, could I ask, Doug and Anya, could you amplify on that a little bit, the 6 areas where help is really needed? Because that really struck me when I first heard it. Just you realize how difficult it is in so many ways to accommodate to the system, the culture here for refugees.
Yeah, it definitely is. And that's the hope of those 6 resource teams that Doug mentioned, and why those specific 6 were chosen, because those are areas of high need for resettlement, housing and employment being 2 very large ones. And so as those resource teams have been being formed, they're focusing on trying to build relationships with landlords who will be willing to not enforce maybe all of those rules that Ali was mentioning. Finding employers who would be willing to hire refugees as they're in the process of learning English. And so that's all in the process of development. There are some good and exciting developments happening in those areas, but a lot more is needed. And a lot of it happens through connection. So even people in this room, if you have connections with employers, or landlords or property managers or someone that just rents their own individual place, let us know and we will connect that with these resource teams. We're trying to get it all in a centralized place so that those things can become accessible for the families who really, really need it.
Well, and I was going to ask, like healthcare, transportation, just some examples, because I don't think we realize how many areas you have to fit in on to function. There's so many ways that you can't function if you don't have all these built-in abilities to manage the system.
Yeah, so the resource teams that are working so far are with employment, English, and these are various ESL programs throughout the city, education, and that's with Salem Kaiser School District, healthcare, including a component developing to provide mental health resources, housing, including the process of collecting in-kind donations and household items for helping to set up homes, and cultural navigation, which has a number of facets under it. The ones functioning so far that are just getting started are an advocacy group that's working on putting together a manual that will be compiling all these resources for the volunteer teams that are working with refugee families, interpretive services, legal services. As you can imagine, there's a lot of legal issues of family reunification. Refugees have to apply for a green card at 1 year. They can apply for citizenship at 5 years. Transportation, meals, and technology. So at this point, those are the teams that are working. And you just start thinking through the various aspects of just what it takes to live in a city, in any city. And you realize there's just a lot we innately know just from being here and growing up here that you would have to be learning from the very beginning if you were coming here from somewhere else.
Hello, I'm Richard Scott. I have one quick question, and maybe one that would involve a little bit more. Alan mentioned a blog, and we've talked about thousands and millions and months and years, and getting in touch with you. But what's the blog's name?
Yes, so it's on the sheet that you got, number 3. It's salemforrefugees.org. And it's also at the very bottom of your sheet as well. The email address, info@salemforrefugees.org, and then www.salemforrefugees.org. Like Doug said, it's one page at this point. We have a volunteer team working on getting us a fuller functioning site, which hopefully will be coming soon.
Karen Heiberger, Salem Club member. I have a question about the funding piece of all this. Obviously, Catholic charities and nonprofits are involved at the front end. You mentioned about a contract. When does government taxpayer funding kick in for food stamps, Section 8 housing, Medicaid, all that sort of thing? Is it not at all after a year? How does the funding piece work?
Am I taking that one, team? Good
Why
question.
they call you the director.
So Congress is actually who decides on the budget for refugees, and with that comes SNAP, right, food stamps, and then the temporary assistance for needy families. So that's, again, happens 30,000 feet in terms of before you can decide, can we afford as a country to bring in 85,000 or 110? Congress decides that. With regard to the contract that the resettlement agencies have, interestingly enough, we receive admin reimbursement of $950 per person. That's it. So we resettled about a little over 500 last federal fiscal year, so you multiply that by 950. That's not very much money to run a program that requires you to take care of the family for a short period of time. One of my staff members, who's the program manager, Michelle Welton, she always says, it's a program, I can never get this saying right, pull yourselves up by your bootstraps type of program, but they don't give you shoelaces, so it is really that. It's minimally funded. What I forgot to mention was when refugees arrive, they have the same rights and responsibilities as you and I do. They are eligible for OHP, they are eligible for SNAP, food stamps, and TANF immediately, but that money, again, is already allocated from the millions of dollars that they have before they make the decision. Does that, or did I complicate it even more? But I mean, it's all taxpayers' money, right, that go into it. But it's all divvied up, veterans, homeless, single mothers, domestic violence, and refugee is a part of that.
Eugenia Becker, Salem City Club. I think this question is for talk again. You mentioned that there's a tremendous difference between how refugees are settled in Portland and in Salem. I wonder if you'd give us a few examples of what the difference is.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll go ahead and take this opportunity to name drop. In Portland, there's so many people, and there's different school districts, and it's a little bit wider net. Here in Salem, there's a closer relationship with people. I'm not saying that it's a small city, but I think people are really united here. So with regard to transportation, for example, chariots, they just stepped up right away and says, we will not only assist with bus tickets, but we'll teach orientation of how to access the bus, right? The Salem School District, we got a chance to sit with those decision makers who really created a system for how we enroll students. Not only how we enroll, but we actually set up here's where the family's going to live, what school would they go to, what systems do we need to set up, right? So it's actually people and organizations who I can get a chance to have a conversation with. In Portland, it's just big. And also, this program is hidden under everything else. It's not as visible as it has been here. And I'll be really honest, when housing started to become a crisis in Portland, I said, you know, let's look outside of Portland, and contractually, we're not able to go beyond 50 miles. And then I tapped into my own personal experience as well when we resettled and went to New York, Salt Lake City, Idaho, and then we went to heaven, which was Fresno, California. Lived there for 10 years, and then my parents drove us through the Alcan and we went up to Alaska. Not just Alaska, but to Kodiak Island. And I remember what that was like for our family. That transformed me. We lived in the hood in Fresno, California, in the heart of poverty. And I just was one of hundreds of other refugees. But when we got to Kodiak, I saw my teachers took a chance on me, really believed in me, and that's what we're seeing here in Salem. I have no doubt that every family that's resettled here in Salem is gonna have business cards with their family's name on it. Those are things that I think we take for granted. In fact, I don't even like giving my business cards away. Those are things that I'm so proud of, right? That I know so many of these families will have a chance to get. But also, each family that we've been able to welcome here in Salem has anywhere from 5 to 10 volunteers surrounding them. That is not what we have in Portland, unfortunately. Some families do have volunteers and some just don't. Sorry, that was really long-winded. But yeah, there's chariots, you know, the medical folks down here, and then also the school district. God, am I missing anybody? And all the faith groups that come together here, like how do you get to, maybe that's not the word.
Well,
collaborate, not corral, collaborate.
Tak, thank you for speaking so favorably about Salem. We appreciate that. I think now we have to close down the televised part of the program, and I believe all our speakers are available, at least for a little while, to answer. If you want to come on up, you can ask some more questions, and because it's a big topic, it appears, a very huge topic. So thank you to the speakers once again for being here.